So welcome back to another episode of Beyond Funding. Today I'm excited to be joined by Alison Berry, Regional Leader for the South East for Christians Against Poverty. And today we're going to be talking about the growing issue of household debt and how charities like Christians Against Poverty are working to help people who are struggling. So thank you for joining us on the podcast, Alison. I was wondering if you could start by telling us a bit more about Christians Against Poverty and your role there.
Absolutely, and it's a delight to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So we like to describe Christians Against Poverty, or CAP for short, as a church-based movement. So we're effectively around 33,000 people located all across the four nations of the United Kingdom, but working locally in their communities, whether that's individual Christian supporters that are giving to us financially every month, to people that are running debt centres, job clubs, life skills communities, or money coaching, and the volunteers and church leaders that go alongside that. And CAP was born out of one person's lived experience of debt and poverty. And so our purpose today as that church-based movement is to respond to the reality of debt and poverty that people are still facing today. And my role as South East Region Lead is just to be right at the heart of that church-based movement. I look after all of our services, centres and churches and the volunteers that go alongside that right across the South East, just bringing hope and purpose to people in quite desperate situations.
And can you give us a bit of an overview of the current state of poverty and debt in the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently 1 in 5 people in the UK, or around 14.4 million people, are living in poverty. They probably wouldn't describe themselves as such, but that's the reality. If we define poverty as not having sufficient income to cover your basic needs, that's the reality. And it means that those people can't fully participate in society. They wake up anxious for their future every day, and practically they often can't pay their rent, or that they can't support their family through food and other things. And we know from our research that currently today there are around 9 million people in the UK with problem debt, and about 3 million people who are at the stage when they really do need to seek some proper advice and support. And over and above that, we estimate about 1 million people who really need that face-to-face, personal, wraparound support that an organisation like Christians Against Poverty offers on the ground in your community.
Well, they're really high numbers, aren't they? That's really scary. I was wondering if you could share a bit about what the main factors or drivers are that are causing these high levels of debt.
Yeah, there's loads of them. There's loads of different reasons. And I quite often say to people, it's just 1 or 2 life changes that can take people from maybe coping to being in a situation of major financial crisis. But things such as the high cost of energy and essentials is a massive driver at the moment. Lack of income through maybe being on a lower paid work role, an unexpected expense. And we know that many people don't have financial resilience. So an unexpected cost of only £200, a lot of people would simply move into debt or financial crisis. Poor mental health or poor physical health are real drivers. Maybe just not having had some financial education and budgeting, so not having that life skill to be able to do that. Caring responsibilities, lack of income through maybe low benefits or social security, or not even knowing that you're eligible for something. Maybe having lost a job. Bereavement is another big one, or relationship breakdown. So as you can see, there are many and varied different reasons, but above all, I would say that all of our research and experience shows that the number one reason why people are being pushed into debt is by having low incomes. So they have no choice but to put essential living costs onto credit, and that is just a spiral. And we do know that 82% of those pulled into debt are in that situation because they're trying to pay for food, gas and electricity and using credit.
Yeah, and I was reading actually recently that in April the energy price cap is meant to increase by, is it 6.4%?
It is.
So
yes.
that's going to drive people into even further debt and with their energy providers themselves, perhaps.
Absolutely. And whilst the energy price cap calculation is made up of lots of factors, the reality for people on the ground is that they're already making brutal choices between putting the heating on and feeding their family. So them increasing again, and all of us have seen those incredible hikes that have happened on energy costs. And for, again, people that are on lower incomes, a disproportionate amount of their income is spent on those essentials, and therefore when they're going up at a rate that is beyond inflation, it is incredible. And social security benefits and income certainly aren't keeping pace with those levels of inflation.
So has the level of debt changed and evolved in recent years, though, then, in terms of those things that you were mentioning?
They have, and I think what we're seeing in terms of that debt pattern is the types of debts that people have are really consolidated into some of those critical ones. In fact, things such as council tax, rent arrears and energy ones are the main debts. And unfortunately, it also correlates with the type of debt that have significant consequences for not paying them. As an example, if you miss 1 month's payment on your council tax, you then are eligible and required to pay your full year of council tax. And so that entire amount is then a debt. And councils are very litigious very quickly because they need to bring in their council tax, obviously, and they often will sell on that debt. And then the enforcement agencies move in very, very quickly. And as a result of the debts being those, what we would call priority debts, it means that the mental toll that it has on people when they're receiving all of these demands by phone, by text, by people turning up at the door, it's incredible. And people have sleepless nights. People won't leave their house. People won't answer the phone. They won't answer the door. And shockingly, and this, every time I say it, it shocks me, 1 in 2 of our clients that came to CAP for debt help had considered or attempted suicide as a way out of their debt. That is absolutely shocking that in the UK in the 21st century, that we are living in a society that feels so unjust and unfair that people think that that is the only way of resolving their debts.
It's really scary, and it does scare me now that certain types of debt are so accessible. Especially, I feel like getting into debt is kind of more of an easy route than it used to be with young people, perhaps because you've got these buy now, pay later schemes that have evolved over recent years. So to me, that's scary in terms of how accessible debt is for people.
It is very, very accessible. And there are also some parts of the industry that are very unregulated. And that's something that as Christians Against Poverty, we've really advocated in the space, particularly around buy now, pay later, which is a quite unregulated part of the credit industry. And in fact is something that we would also advocate for real financial education for young people around that, because I know that I go into schools to talk to teenagers about the issues of budgeting, for example, and many of them don't realise that one of those providers, they are actually taking out a loan. They're going into debt to pay for something. So that's, a one area of significant. And then other changes that we've seen, that it's really easy to go into debt in many areas. Things such as unexpected charges like the new ULEZ in London, for example, that has significant consequences where people can't afford to pay a £12.50 a day charge if you're needing to go into that zone. And then they're having to take out some sort of personal loan in order to replace a vehicle. And they can't get credit, so that they will be resorting to more harder forms of credit. So everything from doorstep lending to payday loans, and again, the less regulated, higher interest rates. So again, it does send a real big spiral.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a really slippery slope, and you kind of are testing these kind of softer bits of debt, and then it's quickly spiraling into these, as you say, these really kind of hardcore areas of debt as well.
Yes, and you can see why it creates incredible pressure and sleepless nights. And I think one of the things that we at Christians Against Poverty would work with, the regulators, with the enforcement agencies. I was just talking to a client, her name's Sam, she won't mind me sharing her name, she shared her story, but she talks of the sound of the enforcement agencies hammering at the door in the place where they should feel safest, in their own home, is the place where they feel trapped and imprisoned. And that is no way for people to live. And they, by their own recognition, Sam and Paul, two amazing clients, talked about how they had reduced the size of their life so much, they had cut out everything that was possible, and yet they couldn't deal with these debts where people were just coming after them.
That's awful. And I was wondering, are there specific demographics that you feel are more impacted by debt? And has this shifted with everything that you've been talking about?
So it's important to say that debt can impact anyone, anytime, everywhere. We do know from our CAP clients, because obviously that's the area that we know well, that a large proportion of them are single. So around 86% are single people. And quite a big proportion are in that 41 to 60-year-old age group. And a large proportion, about 78%, are living in rented accommodation. So that there are some patterns that go alongside. And we also know that about 64% of our clients had another support issue. So that might be a physical or a mental health issue, or it might be another disability, for example, impacting their ability to engage with sort of online services. And as you'll know, that many of the ways that we access our financial credits, or either banking or through the way that we pay our bills, is all done electronically, and many people find that hard to access. So that area of accessibility is another demographic that I would say is disproportionately affected.
So what services are actually in place to support people that are struggling with debt? And would you say they're sufficient at the moment?
So there is a range in this country of free regulated debt advice. That's the positive news in that. It is available. So when people are struggling, there is access to free regulated debt advice. Quite a lot of those services are online or on the telephone. And whilst they provide a service, they tend to deal with maybe the more straightforward cases, and they would deal with people who are able to journey through that sort of advice in that sort of way. Those services are often funded by the financial credit industry in order to support people who then get into debt. The truth is, the type of people that desperately need the gentle journey along, and who are often very vulnerable through other situations and really would value that face-to-face support, that is more costly to do, both from a time and every other model perspective. Those are the areas, like Christians Against Poverty, that receive no statutory funding, certainly in England and Wales. And that's the area where we would say needs supporting. And we're quite big in this area. That's a massive gap. So I think there is an opportunity for, more funding for these face-to-face, which have really good outcomes. But normally you need a high level of investment in order to get those really good long-term outcomes.
Yeah. So you mentioned a bit about yourselves. So could you share some of the programs and services that Christians Against Poverty is providing for people that are struggling?
Absolutely. So we only work through the local church, and we do that because the local church is in every community right across our nation. Often they're the ones providing those local trusted services, from a toddler group through to a food bank, through to, you name it, an old people's lunch or something. So it's really important to us that we always work through the local church. That being said, we serve people of all faiths, no faiths, and we would never discriminate on the basis of any of those protected characteristics. We are absolutely open to everyone. But the mechanism is through the local church. And so we partner with around 870 churches to run our core services. So we would run debt help. Obviously, all of them are free at the point of service. So our debt help is fully regulated through the Financial Conduct Authority. We have a free phone helpline, and somebody would call and they would get an appointment at their local centre. And then it's very much teamwork. So there are the accredited debt advisors sitting at our support hub based in Bradford, but you've got a local team who see the client on the ground. They understand their situation. They gather the paperwork. The advice is done. They would then visit them, understand, are there anything else that they need help with? Do they need a fuel voucher? Do they need an emergency top up? What emotional support do they need in order to journey them through? And one of the shocking things we know is that often, it is around 2/3 of our clients have waited a year before asking for help, and 1/3 wait up to 3 years. So when our local teams go and meet them, and it is often in their own home because their own home has become a place of feeling vulnerable and feeling scared, our local team of volunteers, befrienders, and sometimes paid staff will walk in and they bring hope straight away. Somebody has heard them, somebody has seen them, and will walk as long as that journey takes to get them through to a debt solution. And we offer a full suite of debt resolution options, from insolvency, which is the route that some form of insolvency that many of our clients will go through to a debt management plan, which is effectively repayment, or some slightly more complicated resolutions, but we offer that full suite. So that's the free debt help, which is obviously a big chunk of our work. But alongside that, we've got other supporting services. So we run life skills and job club community groups, which are to help people either struggling with employment or just living with the reality of quite a low income, which can often be a cause of debt. If you either haven't got a job or are struggling to manage on a low income, that can lead to debt. So we have those community-based groups. And again, on top of that, we also have thousands of churches actually that run money coaching. And that is about the basics of budgeting. And again, sort of peer support and some one-to-one coaching to really help people just to get to grips with how you manage your money on a day-to-day basis, how you put together a budget, how you'd look to cut costs, cut back or cut out in order to make that all-important budget balance. So those sort of our core services that run through the church. We have thousands of those running everywhere. Obviously, we're always looking for more church partners to come on board because sadly there are some communities, there are some whole towns and even some whole cities where those services are not accessible at the point of need. So we're always looking for more partners and often the funding in order to enable churches to do that on the ground. And then we have another range of services, many of which are available through our website, which is capuk.org. Things such as some budgeting tools. We have some great new tools for kids and youth budgeting that people can download and run them in schools or other environments. We have things such as our benefits calculator run in partnership with Turn to Us that through a 10-minute check identifies areas of benefits or social security that you may be eligible for. And we know that there are billions, literally, of unclaimed benefits each year. So we offer that completely free of charge service that anybody can check and see if they could be eligible for something. And then we have a whole series of other resources such as blogs and advice on some key areas, such as the winter fuel payment was a very key one that people want to find out. And again, we mentioned earlier about even the energy price cap, in order that people can see what that means to them and what they can do about it. So a whole suite of things that are sort of more self-serve that people could go and find out about. And then we have all of our main services run on the ground through the local church and an incredible team of very compassionate people that run those.
Yeah. So you mentioned about one of the big challenges is the sheer volume of people that are struggling. I was wondering if you could mention maybe some other challenges that you're facing as an organisation in addressing this need.
Yes, the sheer volume, demand outstripping supply is a massive one. I think some of the other challenges are around, part of our work is advocacy or challenging things that systemically need to change. And I think they're quite wide, but there are some key focus areas. And one is about sufficient income, and particularly things such as the rate of inflation. Simply, if you're on benefits, your increase in benefits does not keep pace with the rising costs. And so unless there's some systemic change around that, then we will just continue to see people that will go straight back into debt again after we've worked with them. So that would be a key challenge that we need to face into. And obviously, as an organisation like ours, we would work with the Department for Work and Pensions. We are working with local MPs so that they've got the stories from their local community to share about how these things work. And obviously advocating in the area of energy price caps. All of those systemic things definitely need to change in order to mean that we can help more people. And even simple changes such as making people aware of benefits that they may be eligible for isn't something that proactively happens, but would make a real difference to people's living situation.
So I'd really like to understand, a bit more about what future plans and goals that CAP has in terms of moving forward in this area.
So we know, as we've said, that the demand is just increasing. And ultimately, I guess our goal and our vision over the next few years is that wherever somebody is facing financial vulnerability or crisis, that there is a local church in your community that can help you through that struggle. That's ultimately what we want to do, is that we know. I'd love to sit here and say, do you know what? We're trying to wind down because there's not going to be a need for our services, but that isn't the reality. And so we would rather be about knowing that there are always going to be people in financial vulnerability and crisis, and we want to make sure that wherever that is, there is a local church that is equipped and inspired to help people on that journey. That's going to mean some changes. It means that we need to put in place maybe some product innovation. Obviously, there are some technology that will help us in that. I think we're all seeing how the likes of artificial intelligence, AI, can help us with some of the provision of debt help, for example, but that will always be an enabler. I haven't seen yet AI that can work with the level of compassion that is needed on the ground and that real personal understanding the person and holistic support. So, the use of technology, product innovation, we need to be more agile as an organisation to see trends and to adapt our services and our products and our partnership models to go along with that. So that's really what we want to do. We want to increase our impact because we know it changes lives. And when you've seen it in action, and you know that it changes lives and people's lived experience, then why would we not want that to be available everywhere?
And that leads actually very nicely on to my next question, which is, I wonder if you could share a really memorable story of someone whose life has been transformed by your support.
So I'm just going to talk about Simon. There are so many, but I'm going to talk about Simon. And Simon, his financial crisis started at the moment his wife died. He, by his own admission, had not looked at finances at all, and his wife had managed all of everything and all of it. And at the point that she died, you can see that that is an incredible emotional turmoil. So he ignored everything. He didn't pay a single bill for about 2 years. And obviously things spiraled to the point where he was about to be evicted from his rental property. And the sad truth is that he saw no other way out. And so he decided he was going to try and end his life. He didn't succeed, and shortly afterwards, it was his landlords who recommended that he got in contact with Christians Against Poverty. And again, because it's a face-to-face service, a local team from his church turned up to his home, and nobody had crossed the threshold of his home for 2 years in that time. And he wouldn't have seen anybody else. He wouldn't have reached out to anyone else, but people came into his home and they started a journey with him, slowly at his pace. And he went debt-free. But honestly, the transformation doesn't stop there. He was invited into community. He was invited to start going to his local church. And his life turned around 180 degrees. He found community, he found hope, he found purpose. The debt sorting out was just one part. It took him from being lonely and not wanting to live anymore to wanting to be a full part of society, his local community. Utterly incredible. And he says, I had never experienced such calm, such peace, such love in my life. And knowing that he was free not only from his debts, but he had a whole new purpose. He now volunteers with his local debt centre. He goes on those visits. The one that was released from the debt is the one to hold somebody else's hand on that journey. And that, I can't sum up the work that we do any better than Simon's story. And life isn't easy for him. He lives on an incredibly tight budget. He's one that would say that the cost of living crisis has impacted him disproportionately. He has to be very careful. But what he's gained from going through the debt help and advice and going debt-free has just utterly transformed his life. It's that hope, it's that purpose. He has a future. He never thought he'd have a future, and he absolutely has a purposeful future.
That's such a lovely story. And I think something that's really shone through everything that you've said today is how important that relationship building is, and that actually if people feel less isolated, they've got someone friendly to talk to, that's the first step in helping them out of these problems that they're facing.
It is, and we often say that, obviously our debt help, we have a free phone number for people to call in order to get booked in. And we very deliberately do that because it can be that people could just see our phone number, a poster in their local GP. And so there has to be an instant accessibility. But we say to people, that phone call that you make is the only thing that you need to do on your own. You make that phone call on your own, but after that, you are absolutely not on your own. There is an entire community ready to support you, to champion you.
Alison, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, honestly, and I've learned so much, and learned so much that I didn't expect about what the work that you do and also the situation that people are facing. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of Beyond Funding. As usual, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels so you don't miss out on future episodes. And please like and comment if you'd enjoyed this episode.